So hopefully you can hear us and see us. Just wait for people to settle down. This is obviously the final session through to before the awards that we'll do a bit later. But what we have here for you is really an opportunity to have a discussion with some people who are very much involved in shaping what is happening at the forefront of education in different ways in different parts of the world. And so just to introduce them first before we kind of move on to some questions. And just to be clear, when we talk about questions, I'm also very happy to take questions from the audience. So if there's anything that you'd like to raise or bring to the attention, it's meant to be a lively debate, so don't be shy. So immediately to my right, I have Miguel Brecha, who is the president of Plan Ceibal in Uruguay, which was inspired by the One Laptop Per Child program developed by Nicholas Negroponte at MIT. And it's had a profound impact on terms of equal opportunities in terms of bringing inclusion, and we'll hear more about that. But what's fascinating is that today more than 570,000 students and teachers have their own laptops. 99% of them have connectivity in their education facility in Uruguay, and 50% of them do not have to walk more than 300 meters from their home to get internet connection. And that is fascinating in terms of looking at a model about how to create inclusion by using the infrastructure and making it available on a wide basis. So a really interesting position from there. And then moving on, we've got Sashwati Banerjee, who is based in India, and she leads the Sesame Workshop's educational mission there and creating kind of innovative and engaging content that helps children to reach their potential. And what's interesting is really understanding how that's delivered, and in terms of actual numbers, it's fascinating because through that platform, she's addressing over 18 million children a year, so a huge audience. And then finally, Dr. Satya Nitter, and Satya is currently the worldwide leader and program director of the Cognitive Sciences and Education Technology Research Department at IBM Research. And a lot of you will know about the IBM Watson program. And so I think what will be fascinating as part of this discussion is looking at how technology and what IBM have done and how that links into really the practical implications for teachers, for schools, and for kids themselves, obviously. So to no further ado, what I would really like to do just as a starting point is just to get a perspective on this important point of how technology really can be implemented at a practical level. And what I'll just ask as a way of opening it up is just to ask each of the panelists, if they could, just to give their own perspective on what they have seen in their particular environment, and use that as really as the starting point for a conversation. So, Miguel, would you be able to start on that?
Yes, good afternoon to everybody. I think that when we want to introduce technology in a country like what we did in Uruguay, the first thing we have to think is, why do we want to do it, right? We, in Uruguay, took it as a moral and political issue that we believe that internet, water, and electricity is the same type of basic utility that has to be in every school and in every middle school. So we started this program in 2007 with a clear equality and equal opportunity thing in mind, right? We knew that it will impact in education, we knew that it will impact in learning, and we knew that it would impact in the infrastructure needed to build this. But to have clear goals when you start introducing technology is very important. The second thing is, once we deployed, it took us 3 years to cover all 2.5 years to cover all primary school. Now we have 10 grades of students from 1st to 10th grade with devices, laptops, tablets from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd year of primary school, then laptops, and we change the laptop every 3 years. So the second question, once you address the basic question, is why you put technologies, what do you want to do with technology? And for me, at least, it's very important that technology has to be an answer to a problem and not the problem where we look for an answer. And so we divide the technology implementation in two phases. One is how do we use technology for things that without technology we cannot solve. And that I can talk to you about teaching English, about books available for the students, about platforms, but they're regular things. That technology has a plus, but can be done without technology. But the most important thing is how, if we want to be on the 21st century and discuss the 21st century skills and do collaborative learning and critical analysis, citizenship, how can technology accelerate the pedagogy for that? And then the center has to be in pedagogy. So we do a lot of programs that have to do with robotics, with coding, with personalization of education, with many aspects, but centered on the pedagogy. It's a much more difficult issue because it's much easier to deploy laptops than to discuss pedagogy and how this improves. But I think that the biggest challenge is to put the right questions and to look for the right answers.
That's really interesting. And then, I mean, moving on to Saraswati, in terms of India, I mean, what's fascinating in that comparison, you've got very different sizes of countries. And so, you know, the idea of one laptop per child and adopting that policy, it's got a very different approach. So when you look at what you're trying to do, how do you approach it? Because, you know, our sense is that you're using it in a different way of trying to get to children because the technology issues are very different.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was fascinating. I was talking to Miguel last night, and when he was telling me that he was instrumental in making sure that all the children in Uruguay and the schools had technology, I was going, oh my God, how long is that going to take us in India to do? Because you're talking about, you know, over 165 million kids in the age group of 0 to 8. And 90 million of them have little to no access to schooling, let alone technology. And even though it's the fastest growing mobile market in the world, the smartphone penetration is only 17%. And who knows how fast that's going to grow in terms. So in terms of access and affordability, we are way behind many countries. So there is, you know, I call it the promise and the potential of technology in India.
But does that mean you're having to find, I mean, you're using, I mean, obviously content's a large part of what you're doing. Are you trying to make up for that through what you're doing with content? Yeah,
so we started looking at it in 2 or 3 different ways, actually. One is, we know for sure that, that digital games and applications and learning, digital learning does move child indicators, that it does accelerate. We also know that it's and we've heard this today many times, that it's an enabler, not a replacer. So we have projects where we've demonstrated outcomes where children who've been given digital learning have fared better than children who've just been given basic books, etc. But I think for us, the challenge is, how do we really look at using low-cost technology platforms so that we can maximize our reach? So one of the projects we ran was we broadcast radio programs, but we made it available through an IVRS mechanism at the back end, so that children who were in remote rural areas or children who were of migrant population and did not have access to school could access our project and our program on the mobile phone. So, so we have to constantly look at innovative ways to make it accessible. Which is a nice, I think, segue into Satya, just because I think what would be intriguing is just really thinking about what you're doing, and particularly in the context of, you know, is what IBM are doing in this area, is it a solution for all, and can it work for teachers, and can it work in low-cost environments, or is it really something for kind of the developed world and those who've got the money to pay for it?
Ouch.
I'm sorry, I picked on you. I'm sure you've got a good answer.
That's a fair question. No, I mean, you know, recently we announced a partnership with Sesame Workshop, right? And the whole goal of that is to provide access to children worldwide, high-quality learning experiences that will help them pick up language. So language learning and vocabulary building in English is what we're starting with, but we definitely foresee going to other languages as well. But there are, I mean, these are relevant issues, which are, can you actually enable kids in the developing world to access these applications, and how would this work in environments where there's no internet connectivity, right? And I don't think we even have to go as far as the developing world. Even in the US, it's actually quite shocking, the disparities between what happens in inner city school districts and what happens in the more suburban or the wealthier school districts. Places like Brooklyn, they don't look anything like Uruguay. We are lucky to have one old 1990s desktop that's functioning per classroom. Kids barely have any access, right? So there are issues like this that exist out there. These issues IBM can't solve, but what we can solve and what we can address is within the parameters of what exists, we can actually do some very interesting things. And the solutions will be different for different conditions and different markets. So I'll give you a couple of examples of great innovations that don't exist in the Western world, but that are perfect for the environment that they exist in. About a year ago, we took out a small pilot in a school district in Africa called the Riara schools, where we went to elaborate lengths to figure out how to get the applications that are Watson-enabled to work when there's no internet connectivity at all. So we had the situation where the kids had access to a small tablet in class, and they had no access at home. And if they were to take the tablet home, they didn't have any internet access or on the bus home. So how do you actually design applications where, without internet connectivity, these things work as they are? And so while that might sound somewhat trivial, because this is how applications used to be in the days before the internet, it was actually quite challenging. And so we kind of figured our way out around that. But then there are other ideas out there that are very encouraging. For instance, Akash is a small company in India that was tasked by the Indian government to produce a $35 tablet for everybody. While it didn't quite succeed the way they were hoping it would, what's behind the initiatives like that is the march of technology and the commoditization of technology, right? So while Sashwati, while you say the smartphone penetration in agri is very low, it's only 17% in India, I can bet you that by 2020, the number will look more like 65, 70%, right? So the moment you have smartphones that have some level of internet connectivity, even if it's sporadic, we can do something very interesting with it and get technology to work.
I mean, I know it's interesting you're saying this, Satya, but I think, one of the challenges in developing content, particularly for very young children, that we face is that do we develop for the present or do we develop for the future?
Right.
And because we're a not-for-profit and it's driven by donors largely, that's a question that becomes a conundrum for many of us, is what technology is available today is not accessible and not affordable. And if you're really looking at developing for 2020 and hoping that everybody will have the kind of technology, I mean, it's already obsolete what we develop today. What's going to be used 5 years down the line?
Well, 2020 is just 4 years away. By the time we're done developing it, we're already halfway there.
Sorry, Miguel.
When we started the program in 2006, when we defined the program, it started in 2007, our aspiration on internet was dialed internet, the equivalent of dial-based internet, because that was the standard.
Right.
Imagine what happened in less than 10 years. So the question of what technology to go, I mean, it's going to go to multiple technologies. The only question, how much is reusable in the next phase of what you're doing? I mean, the technology has moved in the last 10 years so fast in the telecom business, right?
Yeah.
And in the machine learning business. That was unthinkable 10 years ago, not 10 years ago, right? So part of our problem is the rate of change of technology.
So does that mean that your advice is go with what's available and just use that and then kind of upgrade as you go along?
Absolutely.
And what about, I mean, just moving in tandem with that is the whole content side, and there's a conversation that you and I had, which is also about the predominance of the English language in a lot of these areas. How do we cope with trying to make sure that the technology rides with the materials and content, but on a universal basis, so that we have, languages that are appropriate for the markets in which this is going. And I guess perhaps start with you, Satya, in terms of how do you kind of respond to that, because there is obviously multiple markets, and I would imagine that most of the stuff you connect into, particularly with IBM Watson, is probably linked into the English language.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, the reality is this is a massive industry. It's worldwide, right? And any one company or organization, no matter how big they are, can't solve it, right? This has to be, I mean, the old saying, it takes a village to educate a child. I think in the internet era, it takes a world to educate a child in this global economy that we grew up in. So really what we hope to do is to form partnerships, create ecosystems, invite people to join and to co-develop with us and with the other people in the ecosystem based on exemplars that we will build as showcases, right? So currently, for instance, Watson is in about 8 or 9 languages. We'll slowly start adding more and more languages, but you could do plenty even without Watson, right? If you have the ability to reach people, you can actually do a lot. And I won't pretend to think that IBM can do it by ourselves. We really want to invite an ecosystem of people to come and join forces with us and do this for the good of everybody on the planet.
So, Miguel, have you looked at Watson?
I'll tell you an example. When Khan Academy started, we said, that's good, but it's in English. So we started a movement in Latin America to translate it to Spanish, a sort of co-work or between different countries, and then we did almost half of it, and then Slim, the owner of the telecom, Carlos Slim, paid for the rest. So if the product is okay or the content is, there's tons of content being done. I mean, in Uruguay, everyone in Uruguay wants to do again what's been done, and I'm not sure if that's only an attribute of the Uruguayan teachers, but it's all over the world. But when people start using something, I'm not scared about the translation, I don't know that. The only thing is the volume of content is big, really big today, right? Yeah. I mean, so, and it's sometimes more difficult where there's so much content than if it would be fewer and more ranked content, right? That the teachers can go and pick up something that it's easier for them, right?
So, I mean, moving it on in terms of, today has a lot have been about how we apply technology and make it practical. And one of the kind of promises, I don't know how real it is, but it's been about trying to create a sort of level playing field through technology. And there's a quote which I briefly mentioned before, which I heard Sal Khan talk about, how there was a Mongolian orphan who was accessing the same resources as Bill Gates' children, and so hey ho, we have a world where everybody's equal. And do we think that's possible or not? So, Sashwati, what do you think?
I mean, it's possible, but is it as effective is the question that I would ask, which is, if the content is out there, can Bill Gates' son access it and can somebody else access it? I guess, yeah, sure. But will Bill Gates' son access it is the bigger question. Mm-hmm. And I'm familiar with Khan Academy's work, actually, and I think they do some fantastic work, and they've just entered India. So whether it's Google going with Google Grannies, or, whether it's Shagato going with, Granny, whatever, or the Khan Academy. I think the question of equal access is, we're not there yet. I think everybody wants the equity and the inclusion, but it's really not possible. And one of my favorite stories in India is that parent education has become a key element of the work we are doing, because there is no, in India, everybody, like the mobile values providers, the MVAS operators, if you go to them and you say, hey, we have this great project, and we would really like you to put it up there so that kids can access it. They tell me, oh, madam, we only do ABCD because that's what's downloaded the most. So what's ABCD, which is astrology, B is for Bollywood, C is for cricket, and D is for devotion. So those are the 4 types of content. Devotion,
Soccer, S for soccer.
S for soccer? No, cricket, this is India. They're like, oh, we haven't even reached E yet. So I think along with the fact that there is a plethora of content available, and as Miguel very rightly pointed out, there is a deluge of content out there, but how do you discover the right content? What kind of, how do you package it? How do you really create that demand and shift mindsets and attitudes? I think that's also something that we need to consider as we are looking at inclusion and equity.
No, sorry,
Some things are desirable, but are not real. I mean, the example of the Mongolian and the Bill Gates, right? It's desirable, but the gap, we have two different gaps to bridge. One is the digital divide, and the other one is the knowledge divide. You may bridge the digital divide, but you don't solve the knowledge divide, right? So it's totally different. And I'm a little bit skeptical about the super production of contents. I'm not saying that you cannot be like, they are very selective on what they're doing. But again, what are we trying to solve with the content manufacturing or ability of building, right? What are we trying to solve? Because everyone wants to do things, but what is the issue we're trying to solve? They are trying to solve the penetration to other populations that don't have access, and it's a fantastic thing. In a country where you have 60% of the people with cable TV, it's a totally different thing. So I think that has to do with investment and what is the industry building. Sometimes we should ask the teachers in many countries, what do they want?
And I think that moves, I think, the conversation on really nicely in terms of what is the role of the teacher, because one of the things that we are acutely aware is that there's an increasing global shortage of teachers, and at the same time you've got the international community who wants by 2020 to provide 12 years of schooling to every kid on the planet, and it seems that these two things are totally kind of unreconcilable. So I guess the question is, how do you find that balance between kind of the technology we're talking to help facilitate the teacher to be more productive, more efficient in an empowering way? But Satya, what do you think? What's the way to solve that?
Right. I mean, to me, one of the great advances and great things about AI, right, as a field, is that it's really about augmenting human intelligence. It's about a set of tools that enable me to be more proficient in my own profession, whether it's a doctor who's trying to diagnose better, or a teacher who's trying to understand their class better and trying to personalize the pedagogy to their class. Right? I'm a great believer in the power of technology and AI in particular to enable teachers everywhere to uplift their standards. On a slightly more mundane level, but equally, I think, compelling, are examples like what's happening in places like Kenya and Nigeria, where very high quality education is being beamed to very remote areas through TV, where people essentially are recording entire lessons from live teachers in the Western world, and they're beaming it to these remote populations, where all you have is an orchestrator in the class who hands out assessments, who turns on the TV, and they're attempting to provide high quality education to those folks. At least it's an attempt to get somewhere, right? But on the whole, I think the notion that I have tools that allow me to understand my class better as a teacher, to personalize to my class, allow me to find the right content at the right time, will go a long way towards narrowing the knowledge divide that Miguel so rightly pointed out.
So, Srati, how do you connect with teachers and empower them with what you're doing?
We train them, and I agree with Satya to one level, which is I think teachers do find it very empowering when they have the technology, but I think they also find it very intimidating. And we find that predominantly, because we work within government schools, we find that teachers are very intimidated by technology. And we need a policy level systemic change in the country.
But are you training teachers, and how do you do that?
We train them, we equip them, we get them familiar, but it's a handful.
I mean, it's a big job.
It's a big job.
It's an impossible job at the end of the day.
I mean, we can't do
technology
it.
has to
The
adapt
government
to
has to do it.
teachers, not teachers to technology.
No, that I agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how easy Google is to use,
Yeah.
right?
Sorry?
Look at how easy Google is to use. Everybody uses Google. They're not afraid of it, right? So I'm with you. I think if you design it poorly, it becomes intimidating.
Yeah.
If you design it beautifully, within 1-2 clicks, they can get to what they want to get. Then it
Teachers were
becomes
never
empowering.
trained to use WhatsApp, and they use it. And teachers use WhatsApp, teachers use Skype.
Exactly, yeah.
These
Because
days,
it's well designed.
WhatsApp is
So-
just like parents use everybody is on WhatsApp groups. It's amazing.
The problem
So-
is that if you analyze the past, the vendors of technology imposed too many things to the schools, right? And so the first reaction of the teacher is to be afraid and intimidated because first they told him
Why is that? Is that because the technology wanted to sell something that had lots of
because
knobs
they
on it to
needed
make
to
it
sell.
exciting?
I mean, in Mexico they spent almost $1.5 billion in whiteboards. And they didn't give them an extra day to the teacher. With one extra day, you don't make it to prepare your classes for the whiteboards. So they spent $1.5 billion. I mean, millions were spent to do ophimatics, I don't know how you say it in English, classes to learn how to use a spreadsheet or how to use a word processing. Imagine a 16-year-old kid, he doesn't need to a lecture how to make a presentation. Hours of school, so teachers are reluctant. Teachers were promised silver bullets for 40 years because these computers in education is not something...
This is fascinating because, I mean, what this is, it seems to me, which is often the case with government policy, you see a big project which has a price tag to it and you can spend the money, you can see the result of a whole lot of technology. You spend that on people and it's very difficult to see what's happened.
Yeah.
And so, you know...
It's also a mind shift, Charles. You know, the thing is that the teachers are intimidated for many reasons, right? A, they're not familiar with it. They are really... You know, for 30 years in their life that they've been teaching, it's been the chalk and talk, right? So suddenly you hand them a mobile phone or a tablet, they don't know what to do with it, and nobody is really taking them through this whole thing of this is what you do, this is how you. So it's also getting them familiar with the technology. You know, they don't know how to access YouTube or Google or anything. They have to be taught like anybody else.
I mean,
but what about a more radical solution, Satya? Why don't we get rid of the teachers in terms of give IBM Watson in there and we just query them for questions?
You're saving your hardest questions for me, I notice. So I look at AI and things like Watson as augmenting human intelligence. I don't think they will replace teachers anytime soon. I don't think, in fact, the technology is there, actually. I don't think it'll be there for a long, long time, not in my lifetime at least. Because the gold standard has always been human tutoring. One-on-one tutoring from a great teacher to a student has been proven to be the best way to learn. So for me, the value proposition of things like Watson or AI or technology in general to teachers has to be crystal clear before they can adopt it, right? They have to understand that this will save me time, this will make me a better teacher, this will make me much more effective. If that value proposition is crystal clear and it's also very easy, I don't have to spend time learning it, then the adoption will follow.
Yeah.
No, I was going to tell an example. Last year we decided that in 2016 we will do time and attendance online. So we manufactured, software-wise, right, tablets that the only thing they do is time and attendance, right? So again, the teachers, it took some time, but after 2 months, 80% of the students were on that. It's a simple tablet that you see who is in class and who is not, or he uses his traveling card to access. Right? I mean, if you provide a solution to teachers, they will adopt it. It takes time. Adoption is something that takes time. I mean, everybody complains against the teachers, but in my country, now we have the medical records online. Right? How many years did it take? 20, 30 years? Why did it take so much? The technology existed in the 80s. Now it took 35 years to have that online. So let's not get upset with the teachers because we know the banking is online, but the health, many other things are not online or are becoming online. So we have to support the teachers. The beauty of technology is that if we can use things like Watson to help the teachers, so that they feel more comfortable. Because if you give the teacher a tool that he feels more comfortable, he uses it. That's our experience with the math platform. They use it because they don't have to think anymore about sending any exercise to the student. It's in the platform.
Right.
It took them some time to understand that their role is different. If you don't help the teachers to understand that they don't have anymore the Wikipedia role. The worst part of the school with the teachers is that the kids Google what the teachers say. And that brings you to a constant, so you have to rethink your job, the way of teaching.
Yeah.
Well, and teachers are overloaded already. I mean, that's also a big barrier, right? I mean, for instance, in the US with the adoption of Common Core, it was, which is a new set of curriculum standards, it was hugely disruptive. I mean, they already have a tough job, and suddenly there's a completely new set of standards. They've never taught to the standards before. They don't know where to find the content. They don't know how to assess the answers and grade it with the new standards they have. And so it's all a bit much to then come in and say, well, adopt this brand new widget, it'll save your life, right? So it's a multi-part solution that really has to come together here.
So to me, what's exciting about this is, and it's something that I've thought about before and looked into, which is, the technology angle should also be looking at who's teaching the teachers rather than who's just looking at the kids' part of the perspective. And as we come towards the end of the session, what I was interested in is, the reason this panel is formed is because you have all been included in a kind of global index of kind of makers and shakers of people who are having an influence on what's happening in this space. And with that influence, and assuming that you have the benefit of some magic wands that we'll be providing you later, that with those magic wands, what are the things that you could use to actually try and make something really happen that's going to make a difference? Miguel?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
Sorry, you've got a magic wand.
I forgot about the magic bullet and the silver bullet. I would like, my aspiration today is to create an environment with pedagogy and technology and teachers. I mean, we need to have a marriage between pedagogy and technology. And if I had a wand, I would use for that. I mean, the more we go technology on one side and pedagogy on the other side, the more difficult it will be for adoption of the teachers and of the system, right? So my one would be how to include in real life both necessities, the technology necessity and the pedagogy one.
How's your wand working?
I want what Miguel had in Uruguay, which is how can I shake the government into improving the infrastructure to ensure that there is access.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest challenge right now in India. So if I had the wand,
It'd be the infrastructure.
yeah.
No, I'm interested in, now you did say it's a magic wand. I'm interested in transforming learning experiences completely, right? I think part of why education isn't working for a lot of people today is it's not designed to be as engaging as it could be. I think we've forgotten with this whole one classroom model and the one-size-fits-all model that the brain is wired in fundamentally different ways to receive information. And that's why we seek out things like YouTube videos or games, because these things impose less cognitive load on the brain. So I'm interested in fact, my aspiration is to marry the world of neuroscience and AI together to create deeply impactful, deeply engaging learning experiences that are immersive and interactive, and there are no boundaries and class walls anymore. And I'm interested in the process to try and level the playing field. It could take 30 years to get there, but you did say it's a magic wand, and you didn't give me a timeline.
Accelerate time for you as well. So. But I just wanted to leave a little bit room just in case there were questions from the audience. I've got questions if you haven't, but we've got time just to take a couple if anybody wants to raise a hand if they do want to put something to our panel. If not, then I've got a few things that I wouldn't mind finishing off. So. Right, I will have the pleasure of being able to ask the questions.
I think the audience right now is like, oh my God, let us go.
They want the wand. We have a question.
Oh.
You saved us.
I'm curious about, you mentioned the explosion of content in terms of volume. Do you have any interesting views about indexation trends? I mean, ways of maybe having standardization of indexing? I mean, for instance, in this world, we've got lots of global regulators in every other industry that spend their time coming up with don't have those regulators. But I mean, is there any role for somebody to come in and say, look, let's just follow this up?
Yeah, I'll take it. So just to repeat the question to people sitting in the back, is there any role for kind of indexing and quality standards and quality metrics being adopted globally? My sense, to be honest, is I don't think it'll happen. I think content is generally very local, right? I mean, for instance, in India, Sesame Workshop has local content with local characters, and there are a set of standards that are very different from what you'd have in the US, right? But having said that, at least when I was growing up in India, there were 2 or 3 major standards bodies that existed, and so the entire country and every state subscribed to one or the other. In the US, 46 out of 50 states have adopted the Common Core standards, right? So when you have large government initiatives that are trying to standardize curriculum standards, then it becomes very easy to come in and say, here are the metadata that should be associated with content, and here's how you actually extract it. In the absence of that, AI can also help. So we can automatically crawl content and start figuring out what metadata exists and how it aligns to the standards that have been defined, et cetera. But I definitely don't see a set of global standards ever coming out in this space.
Thank you.
I would like,
Miguel.
on indexing, what I would like, if I had a one, is the indexing of the videos. Not on the video, but what it's said in the video. So that any tool can access, if you want an explanation about something, today it's very different. You get a video in general, but I mean, to have a tool that you could go to where that is being discussed inside the video, and that's something that probably someone is working already on that, right? But it's very important because the most useful tool is video, not text. And so there should be some indexing on that side.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we've come to the end of this session and towards the end of today. I mean, this has been an incredibly informative panel, so thank you very much. I think, what it really helps is getting an idea of just how, I think some of the basics is what we need to focus on and what we've got today. So please, to the rest of the audience, give a big kind of a round of applause in terms of thank you. And then next thing we can move on to is the awards, which you'll find follows shortly after this. So not here, but in the Battlebridge room. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on.
Thank you.